Last time we were working on various patrolling behaviors for the enemies within the game. And so we added in various patrolling behaviors like standing or wandering a set of waypoints or wandering around a region that had been selected. And this allowed us to have enemies that were a little bit more active and make the world look more alive. So as we can see the different behaviors shown here by these orcs in the scene. And I want to do a little bit more with them, but it's going to require, or it would be very helpful to have some more interactivity in the game. I want to be able to give certain behaviors and interact with them. I could do that through the inspector, but I'd rather do it without switching back to the inspector view, if that makes any sense. So what I'm talking about here, what I'm missing is the user interface. Right now we have no real user interface other than the keyboard controls that let me move the camera around the scene. And then while that's very important, I want to add in some more UI scenes. We've already seen one example of a user interface element, and that are these billboards that we see over here. These text elements that are on canvases that we attach to objects. So that's our first UI element. I want to add in some more, and that's going to be the subject of today's videos to get started on that. This is the Necromancer user interface, and at one point this was a free asset within the Unity Asset Store. I don't think it's there anymore because it uses the older style user interface that was there, from before Unity 5. Still, it's a good example of a consistent look of UI elements. A lot of work was done here to make all of this stuff, and I want to kind of preserve it. So what we're going to do is take and modernize this to update the user interface, or to create rather a new user interface from all of these components that will work with the current UI tools there. So what we have are things like well, labels, we have buttons, toggles, text fields that one can type on, although this one doesn't appear to be working too well. I have to check to see whether this is working there. We have slider controls. Okay, and these UI elements, I don't know if any of these can resize, but it should be possible to resize these things in general. So this is the Necromancer UI. I thought they had drop-down features as well. I'm kind of fumbling around a little bit here because it's been a while since I've played with some of this stuff. But we're going to work on it today. So I wanted you to see Necromancer in its raw form. And here I see it in the Unity Asset Store too, and it's listed as being supporting Unity versions 3.3.0 or higher. So, and it is free. So it is possible to grab it and work with this. So I would encourage you to download it and play with it if you think that this would help. I'm going to create a new scene that will be the UI scene here, and let's see. I think I'll call this one UI test if I can. Maybe I should save this scene as inside my scene, and this would be UI test. Okay, so now we have a second scene. It's not going to interfere with our first one, and because certain UI usage is not going to be mixed in with our regular scene, and you can mix and match on that. But if we were making title screens, going through the process of creating characters, so we would do that. We could do that in a different scene. Okay, I'm just going to import this into the game, and we see an awful lot of really interesting stuff that comes in, including a JavaScript script, which is not supported anymore. But I'm mainly interested in all of the graphics elements, because we can easily repurpose those. Okay, now I don't know that I want this to sit here at the top level. I'll need to kind of move it around into other assets, but why don't I create a new UI folder? GUI, and then I'll put Necromancer underneath it. Okay, and whoops. Okay, so Necromancer is underneath it. Because I don't know that I'm going to use this as it is right now. I'm going to create new stuff out of it. One thing about it, I want to show off some of EverQuest's original user interface from 1999, just to get an idea of the way things used to be. I think, I'm not sure exactly what some of these images were put up on the web for. It looks like some of these things have been highlighted. But we can see how the original 3D window was very small relative to the screen size, because we didn't want to tax the cards too much. We see icons up here to show active spells. These were gems that you could use to cast particular spells, some buttons that were used to pick up different things, some hotkeys down here that were used to initiate different actions, some of the basic commands here, and then a text console here. Let's see if I can run forward. I picked out a few of these just really quickly from the web here. You could have health bars for different people in your group. I think they've cleared out the names here. They've grayed out all the names, which I think really didn't serve any purpose here. So just a excuse me, a blast from the past. So you can see your current target here, and that was a snake that they've just taken care of. And this shows well, I'm not sure what this nonsense is over here. This is probably a bad example here. But if we ignore all this stuff over here, which is not part of the user interface, this was the inventory from the original game there, and you could see how you'd get picked. You get information on some of the things that you might click on. Okay, so we see the stats of the character. All right, so that's why look at it at a 1999 user interface? Well, because I don't want to look at today's user interfaces and say, let's go copy those. Let's look at the very bare minimum that people got by with when they didn't have any choices. One of the things we can see here is the inventory contained a number of icons. And these are small 2D images with transparent backgrounds. They could just paste in here. Somewhere I have a collection of these icon images here that I spent a great deal of time extracting from the game art. And so they may make their appearance again. But these were hand-drawn, low-resolution images, and I think they do a very good job for what we needed. Now I want to show you an old project that was done from previous course, which will be something that we'll attempt to recreate along along some lines here, where we have a window that we can see drag around. There are some hover buttons here, which put up some text when their buttons are hovered over. So these are things that we could use for class, and you can see that the buttons have highlighting so that we can select them in addition to hovering over them. So there will be a current one. There are spin controls, which are non-functional right now. These are just labels here. There is a field that we can type some stuff in here for the name of a character, and then a create button that we can use to create it. So this could be potentially a created button here. The text dragging, the drag behavior is a little weird because it takes whatever the mouse click is and uses as the center of the window. And I may go ahead and fix that in this video. We'll find out. But let's get to this point here. This is all built from Necromancer components, and it shows how the pieces have been stretched. This is a parchment texture that has been stretched out. The edges here, the corners are the same corner sizes. These sides here have been stretched to fill the size of the rectangle. Now this one doesn't resize, so I can't show you that behavior there. I keep trying to resize it, but it can't. Nor do we see any titles on here, but we do see the stretching behavior. This whole stuff up here was all stretched out, but we don't see any distortion. So that's a pretty good thing here. So let me just shut this down here, and we'll work on creating that. Okay, we're back in the scene view. I will be hopping between scene view and showing you maybe prior project code so you can see the working user interface, just for illustrating. I want to discuss the current user interface system, or the new UI system, actually came about right after Unity 4.6. And this system is an instantiated system, which is also sometimes called retained mode. Now, the prior UI mode, which Necromancer was based on, was a pulled UI. So you would always be giving draw commands every frame in like your update. There would be a GUI update that you would be drawing things on. Here, the UI mode, we put things in the scene. They will remember where they are. They will remember properties, like whether a button is pressed or whether something has text on it. We can pull it. We can have callbacks on it. So it is pretty nice. Now, I know that Unity 4.6 is a few years old, so this isn't really the new system anymore. But I bring it up because we are taking a much older UI system and taking things from it. The point, though, of doing that is that these are just assets that somebody drew, and they made available on the asset store. They're still out there. So knowing how to take art that we get from wherever, hopefully that we have rights to use, but being able to take it and work with it gives us the ultimate flexibility. We don't have to rely on somebody else to make every single UI element that we need. We'll be able to build things up. Okay, first thing I want to add is a canvas. If we look under game objects, we see under UI, one of these is a canvas. Every user interface will have a canvas. These are required. If we attempt to add something like a button or a scroll bar, it will create the canvas for us. So there's no getting around that. When I drag the canvas in, what am I doing? If I just say I want you to build me a canvas, we get an event system at the same time. Okay, now this canvas is huge. We say huge, it is really the same as the game Windows resolution here. Now I'm on a free aspect ratio, but I could preset a aspect, and you can see how the canvas is changing size to match that. Okay. Now, since these are in Unity units, which is a meter basis, this is a couple of kilometers on a size. So it's pretty big. But if we're just dealing with a UI by itself, if we're overlaying onto the screen, it doesn't matter how big it is. It will overlay one-to-one on the screen. So it won't matter if it's kilometers wide in game space there. And that's typically how user interfaces are used. So even though we have a scene in the background, this will be over the top of it there. The only time that a canvas size matters is if we're putting it into the 3D scene, like was done with the billboards. The billboards became scene elements. Okay, they were there in the scene, they moved around. This is for a static user interface. The canvas is transparent. Okay, if we were to run it right now, all we would see is the skybox down here. There's nothing to be seen there. We need to put something, a visible UI component on there before we'd see anything. So I'm going to add panel to it. And by default, panel shows up there. You notice that this kind of fuzzed out a little bit there. That's because the panel is translucent. Okay, by default, the image has this background image, which is one of in our the background. Let me just go back to my panel here, and here's the image here. It's a 9-slice sprite. It has 9 sections to it. Okay, the middle section will stretch as much as needed in both the X and Y directions. These middle pieces, the horizontal and vertical bars on the cardinal, up, down, left, and right, they will stretch to fill their side however big it's needed. The corner pieces will not stretch at all. So this allows us to control deformation of our graphics. Okay, so we're going to pick pieces to fit in there that will stretch without deformation. So if you look at this, you'll see that this is just a gray area with a bar, the dark bar there, and it won't matter how much we stretch it, we will still get the same look. The corners cannot stretch without being deformed. And the center is all a uniform color, so we can stretch it all day long without deformation. Okay, so that's our introduction to the panel. If I look at the color, note that the alpha channel, so that's the red, green, and blue channels, this alpha channel is set to 100. So this is translucent. If this is fully opaque, that would mean alpha 255, then we will not be able to see through it at all. If we lower it there, it becomes more and more transparent until we are fully transparent at the 0 side. So just look at the camera view in your lower left, and you'll see the effect of that. So I'll put it back to somewhere around 100 for now, and we'll change it later on. The sliced portion here tells us that it was the 9 slice, and so that it knows that it's free to stretch it as we asked for. So that's the basis of a panel. Okay, so it had these anchors are these positions over here, and there is an anchor mode here, which will let me move individual anchors. This is not, I'm sorry, the rectangle mode here. I can move pieces around in the rectangle. I'm not going to do that just yet, but I can change the anchors here, and I can say whether I want the image to be have affinity for one or more of the anchor points around it. That will become clear when it comes time to stretch things and position things. As I stretch the panel, how do I want the elements in the panel to align themselves? I can say I want everybody to be aligned to the left, so they will always hug the left side no matter how the panel stretches. I could say I want them aligned to the top, or I want them centered. So that gives me the ability to do that. The anchor points are just the references to when we anchor things. What does it mean to be left? What it means to be near these anchor points on the left side? Okay. I don't want to get too sidetracked. Here, I want to go back into my GUI folder here, and before I forget, I want to create 2 new folders here that will be UI images and UI prefabs. Okay, the images will be things that I'll take out of the Necromancer GUI as I find use for them, and I'll put them down here so I keep track of things I'm actively using versus things that I have available to me. The prefabs I'm going to build up. Okay, the prefabs did not exist when Necromancer was created, but they work like other types of prefabs. I can combine UI elements together and then put them into a prefab, and then I can build up more complicated UI pieces out of my prefabs. Okay, so we'll see how that works. Okay, let's start rating the Necromancer GUI for stuff. I want to leave this as much alone as possible to preserve my stuff, my source material. I don't like modifying my source material. Let's start with this window background here. This is the window image right here, source image. We can see under its file name that it is window.tga. That is a Targa file. This is a type of graphics file like a PNG or a JPEG. So it shows us what a raster image looks like. Okay, it just has color information for all these pixels. Okay, I want to use this as my background for my panel. Now, well, I'll talk more about the differences between Necromancer and this GUI in this bit. So I will duplicate it with Control D. So now I have window 1, and I will drag my copy up into UI images. I will come back over here, and I'm going to rename it to window. Okay. And let's talk a little bit about this. This is the preview of the image. Once again, a Targa file. It says that it's a editor GUI and legacy GUI texture type, so it is a texture. And not much more about that right now. I want to use this as the background for my panel. And so I see my source image background here. If I go to this little gear icon next to the source image, I can get a list of all of my possible things. Oh no, my image isn't there. I don't see my window background there. That's because these are all sprites. It says select sprite. Okay, so the source image is a sprite. In particular, 9 sprites light. This is not a sprite. If I want to make it a sprite, I will need to change it. It's pretty easy. I just go down here and change it to sprite 2D and UI, and now it's a sprite. Okay, and now I'll hit apply to that. Now if I go back to my panel, and I select this, I see window as a possible choice. Now I could certainly drag that into my scene, but there, I've applied it. And I'm not liking exactly what I'm seeing right here because it seems to be distorted. This is a nice view of it. We see everything. Look particular at these little decorations at the top. How those are circular and this is stretch. And you say, but that's camera angle. Well, this is the camera down here. Now I'm going to go over here to my panel, and I think I want to up the alpha all the way to make it completely opaque. I don't want my window to be transparent at all. So that's what alpha has done for me. Okay, I'm going to come over here to the scene view, and I want to. Where's my camera in the scene here? Well, this is a. Here, what if I scale this down here? I'm trying to get the camera to back off, but unfortunately we're in a screen space overlay, so it's not really going to back off as easily as I would want it to. Let me run it and see what we get here. Okay, so this is what it looks like, definitely stretched. And my reason for wanting to overdo is I wanted to change the aspect ratio. And you can see as I change the aspect ratio, I get different stretching. And distortions show up. Now this is an important tool that Unity lets me do to change the aspect ratio, because we don't always have the choice to pick what the device's aspect ratio is going to be. And we could fix it, but users oftentimes like to run in a windowed mode, or they run on different devices. If I compare the aspect ratio to a PC versus a tablet versus a phone, I mean, we're going to see different screen sizes, different screen shapes, and that's always going to result in different stretching behaviors. A good user interface will look good in all aspect ratios, okay, as much as possible. So I want to try to get that behavior down, and that's what I'm lacking here. Okay, this is distorting on me. Well, let's go and take a look at why that might be going on here. Part of the problem here is that this image, and I'm going to select this, this particular sprite, and this is the sprite down here. Okay, I can pick either one of these things here. But this image is a what am I looking for? It's a single sprite mode. I want it in sliced mode there, and I want oh, hold on a second. Okay, I was a little confused here, but I see what's going on here. I want to select the panel here. This is a panel property, and if I look at the image type here, it's set to simple. I want this to be sliced. This is the, so I can say I want you to tile it or fill it, but I want this to be a slice. I'll say the image doesn't have a border. Well, it doesn't have a border. I thought it did have a border. Well, I'm going to need to give it a border, and I'll show you what I mean. Even though it appears that there is a border around here, I haven't told it what it is. So I'm going to go into the sprite editor, and you see this window pops up. And if you look very carefully, there are 4 little bluish green dots around here. And if I hover over one, the arrows, the cursor changes to arrows. I can drag this now into the interior of the image. And what I'm doing is I'm defining where the border region is versus where the center of the sprite. Okay. So I want to drag it in until it's inside these little decorations, because you see I want different stretching behavior for these sides. In particular, I want the corners not to deform at all. So I'll go ahead and drag this one down here, and you see I'll bring it in. And now this corner over here is isolated. It will not stretch at all. It might scale, but it'll uniformly scale. So there will be no aspect changes. Now I'll come here and drag this one in, and I'll bring it inside of these pieces here. And now I've defined a top border. This is the top border, all defined here. It will be able to stretch to the left and right as much as possible, but you don't see any left-right variation here, so I don't think we'll notice any deformation because of that. If I drag this up, now the bottom is a little special case there. I'm going to drag it up a little bit more into the image, because some of this parchment stuff down here I think would be a little too noticeable if it stretched. So I'll try to keep that down here. And so what I'm left with is a center region, which I'm going to say I want you to be able to stretch as much as possible and deform in either the X or the Y direction. And then I'll restrict the deformation of these side pieces. And let's take a look at what that would be like. Won't be perfect, but I think it'll be okay. Okay, so I'll make sure I hit apply. I have to hunt for it. And then I'll close down the editor window. Now if I go back to my run my program, I want to see how this looks here. Okay. Looks okay. I don't see any problems on that. I'll change the aspect ratio, and looks okay. I want you to look in particular how these corner pieces here are circular and not deforming. If you look carefully at the interior, you'll see that it is stretching, but it's stretching in a way that's not terribly noticeable. I don't think it really looks bad as opposed to the other things. So I can stretch it in any way I want to, which is good. I'm trying to see if I could find the, oh, I'm not running in, I'm not, we don't see the scene view here. Let me turn off, I turned off maximize on play, and I want to, I'm kind of curious what would happen if I changed the panel size here while I was. Now take a look at in the game preview down at the bottom there. As I drag this thing around, you can see it stretching, but you can see the border retaining its shape. That's the power of the retain mode user interface there, and even though it's been several Unity versions later, I'm still excited by it because of what it lets us do that we didn't get prior to that. And this is something that Necromancer never had. Alright, so we created a 9-slice sprite from a target file and applied it to a panel. Okay, now I want some icons here for my classes, and so I've gone and just pulled some down off of the internet from the game Runes of Magic. And so I do not have the rights to use these, but these are just for demonstration purposes. And we can see that these are circular images with a transparent background. Okay, they have some of them have highlighting here around it. That's a nice little highlight there with the little runic shapes around it there. So what I want to do, what I did was I created just a green circle inside of a paint program around some of these. I have mage and priest and warrior. So those are the three that have been resized here. And so I could drag these guys into a scene and put them in there. The plan is that I will replace the regular version with the highlighted version when you hover over it or you select the image. So it'll give me some hovering behavior. And I also want to stress that when I say I don't have the rights to use these, we can use these under fair use exemption from copyright law for these educational purposes. I certainly would not use these for anything I was distributing to somebody else. I do urge you to respect intellectual property of other people's. I'm sure you can find some free assets. I'm sure you could probably, with a little bit of time, create something of your own that looks pretty good. And certainly you could use these as inspiration for creating those. But for just classroom stuff that we're not going to distribute, that's fine. And before I forget about it, I should also mention that these raw images, I went into paint.net and I removed the background. Okay, so being able to select and edit out a background, this is not something that we're not covering paint.net in this course, but it is a good image editing skill there. So that's where these came from. I just found them and then yanked the background out and made it transparent. Okay, I want to use Unity's button controls for this. I want to create buttons that we can click on over here. The button controls from Unity are nice because they have the hover behavior that I want, so that things can happen as I move the mouse over them. They also have the ability to highlight, and I can click on them and get callbacks for events. So the behavior is fine, even if the appearance isn't. So I will take and click a button on it here, and I see that the button is backwards. Okay, I think the problem might be either my canvas rotation or the panel here. I'm going to try to just rotate the panel around this 180 degrees. And the button should not be part of the canvas, but should be part of the panel. Okay, so I'm still getting, I will reset this component, reset rotation on it, and I see a button that looks okay. Now I will click run on it to see if it looks good. Oh, okay, and the game view is giving me something different. Remember, this is an overlay, this is an orthogonal projection onto it, so my rotation trick did not work here. I want to see if I can rotate the canvas now and get it to do what I wanted to. That isn't inspiring me too much from what I wanted to let's see. Well, can I even? Yeah, it keeps resetting the rotation here. Now I could move the camera. Let me play with this for a second. One thing I'm going to correct here too is I really should click this on scene as 2D to view this as a 2D thing here. And now if I reset the rotation of it, there, that looks good. So the scene view and the camera view look correct. Okay, I see some hover behavior as the mouse moves over. I can click on it and I get a little bit of a flash there. So that gets me things looking correctly there. So I don't need any funny rotation stuff. But this is an example of an orthogonal projection. I cannot rotate the canvas at all. It will just, and it really doesn't matter so much where the camera is in the scene. It is going to fill the screen as much as possible. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and edit this button here. I've been messing with it a little bit. But I want to, first of all, remove the text component from it. I won't need any text. This is going to be image only. And I'm going to change its sprite. Right now it's using the UI sprite, which is just a kind of white control. We see the 9 sections around it here so that it can be resized and stretched as much as possible. I'm going to change it to this. As you can see, when I brought in those icons, they show up as sprites because I imported them as sprites. Okay, and they're squished right now because the size doesn't match the shape of the button. I'm going to set it to 100 by 100, which is the raw native scale of the button. And I could either resize the button that way or scale. I could either resize that or scale it. So, 6 1/2 dozen and another. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video right now when I bring these buttons in. Let me rename this one Mage Button. And I want the Mage Button to actually be on the panel and not part of the canvas. And the reason is that if I move the canvas around, the panel around, I want the button to go with it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause that and let me bring in these other buttons. Okay, now I've done that. I have those 3 buttons there. They are pretty big, but and I probably will want to rescale them. But let me really quickly put it in play mode, and let's test some behavior. Oops, let me get out of that. I want to maximize this thing. I still have the ability to switch the aspect ratios here to change things. Okay, you can see that the positions of the buttons are moving all over the place as I do this. They are not anchored, is their problem. They're not anchored to any. They're not placed relative to something. They're given a location and they'll just hold that no matter what happens to the source screen. So that's one of the things I'm going to want to change. But I did get a chance to get a feel for how this looks at different resolutions and different aspect ratios. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. So size isn't bothering me near as much as I thought it would be from looking at this view. I think my first experiment that I'm going to do here is, in fact, I can select all 3 of these and then change their anchoring behavior. If I click on anchors, you can see right now they're set at centered, which means that they're going to be positioned relative to the center of the control. If I anchor them to the upper left, that will let me mean that they will try to keep their position relative to the upper left. I will now move these over here into their final position. Their position up here, this direct transform, will now be relative, will be kept relative to that upper left. So let's try this. Okay, we see them in their upper left, and I will change the aspect ratio around, and we can see that they keep their anchoring behavior. That's a very good demonstration of anchoring and how important it is to user interfaces where controls may resize or reshape. I want to work on a text input control now, or I'm sorry, it's some static text. This will be the text that will be displayed as part of the character creation where we describe the classes that we select. So you can drag your mouse over here and get a description of the various classes. If I go into my Necromancer GUI controls section here, this is where my source image is over here. Text field normal is we have text box and text field normal. I'm going to try text box and play with that and see how that works with. In the past I've used text field normal, but this might be a better choice here. So I'm going to I have a problem here. I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to drag the duplicate into UI images. And I come over here and I will rename it. So I'm going to very quickly go and change that to a sprite. And I will change the image to, well, I'll bring up the sprite editor. Go ahead and apply that. And I'm going to drag these border settings in. And you see I have a little bit more dots here because it's either way I am dragging it in so that that center transparent area can stretch as much as possible. These corners and sides, I've defined my border now, so I will go ahead and apply that. Why are you squawking at me? Okay, maybe I just have to close the thing down. Okay, now I can go to my panel and I can create a UI image. I'm going to create this image over here, and right now it has no background. I'm going to select my text box. Okay, that is part of my UI images text box, and we can see the image up here. I can resize this. I can go to the positioning and reposition it, and that doesn't look too bad. Okay, so it just gives me a nice text border around it. Now I'm going to add underneath this image, and this is going to be called static text, and I'm going to create a Text Mesh Pro text object underneath it. Okay, and so I see my text. It's big and it's not very visible here. I'm going to want to change the color of it so that it's maybe black is fine. Okay, so 000 full opacity, that's pure black. I'm going to remove the outline around it so it doesn't have outline, and I think that's fine there. The size of it should probably be dropped down, so instead of 36 point, let's try 20. That might work for a small paragraph, and so I'm going to want to drag this out here, and then I can create multi-line text from that. Okay, I'm going to wrap things up right now. I'm okay with this text control here. I would like to have different fonts here. I note that I have very limited selection of fonts available with that come with Text Mesh Pro. That's okay. I think the next video I want to digress just a little bit and look to creating a new font that has a little bit more of a fantasy type theme with it. So with that, I'm going to end that video, and I'll see you next time.